Hello, welcome to the third and final module of Care One, our basic learning modules for clear aligners with the Candid Pro system. I'm Brian Gray, the Chief Clinical Officer at Candid Pro, and glad to present this final episode for you to learn a little bit more about clear aligners. In this one, we're going to talk about workflow itself. We're going to talk about the treatment for patients and how we get it to all fit together seamlessly and roles for our team as far as how we want to do it with the staff and team members and have things built out. We're going to also talk a little bit about monitoring and retention. We'll do a recap and then we'll talk about resources and where we want to go when we're all done. So starting treatment is the place that we want to begin. And we left off with that at the end of the last module. We talked about really kind of there's just 2 or 3 visits with Candid Pro. It's a great system. And we start out with our initial kind of consult and records and meeting the patient and discussing care and in particularly discussing informed consent. And then after that, delivering aligners and then monitoring, which is a super easy part because it's without having the patient come in all the time. And then the final part, which is finishing treatment and retention, long-term retention. So with all that, being able to accomplish it in 3 or 4 visits, we talked also a little bit about how half of our patients come from hygiene still. For almost every practice, that seems to be the case as far as GPs are concerned. And that when we introduce it in hygiene, we want to have the doctor reconfirm what our hygienist has already talked about and kind of share why it's such an advantage and the benefits of being able to do clear aligners to help straighten someone's teeth. And then go through the consultation, hand off the patient to the treatment coordinator if necessary, or that may be maybe you, the doctor, or an assistant or whoever. And then go ahead, finalize records, start monitor and finish treatment. So we'll walk through those steps pretty much regardless of how we get there. The beginning part is the introduction with the patient, making sure they know what's going on, gathering records, and then starting treatment, finishing it, and going into retention when we're all done. So one of the probably important things about this that I've discussed a few times is that informed consent. And in particular, we always have this occur at the clear aligner consultation, the very beginning of treatment, because we feel that there are 7 things that are super important for a patient to understand and really truly grasp in order to have success. The first and foremost one is compliance. The patient should be wearing aligners 22 hours a day. They should take them out just for 3 things: to eat, drink, and clean. Otherwise, we want the aligners in the mouth. That's the only way they're going to work, is if they're in the mouth, gently, slowly, comfortably moving the teeth. If we are able to overcome that hurdle, pretty much everything else is really simple. The next one is monitoring itself. We want to make sure that our patients are comfortable and understand monitoring. I'd say of the hundreds of patients that I've treated with Candid Pro, only a couple have opted out of actually using the monitoring. Some have felt that it was too much of a technical burden for them. Just generally the older patients that are not used to having anything but very simple cell phone, for instance, and others that may just prefer not to be bothered, and some that might just want to come in and visit you. But for the most part, and when I say the most part, I mean 99% of our patients who have used Candid, they have loved it, and they've loved the idea of being able to have me keep an eye on them remotely and be able to know that things are on track and we're not losing any ground or any time with things. So understanding monitoring is really super important. And with that, you want to have some time to go through it with the patient, be able to load the app on their phone and have the email sent that gets the treatment initiated, started, is the word we're looking for, and be able to go from there. The next thing on the agenda that's most important for the patient physically is attachments. We rarely use them with Candid Pro. It's one of the beauties of the system. We discussed that in the last module, but we do place attachments on occasion, and I always want the patient to be able to feel those attachments and know about them before we put them on, because we've had patients, again, over the past uh, generation of placing aligners, patients, when we get to that initial visit and we go to put attachments on, they're like, "Whoa, stop, what are you doing?" And they're typically like, "Hey, I didn't know we were having these." And if we make sure we cover it in the consultation visit at this informed consent, we, in essence, make sure that we're able to remind the patient of what's going on and answer their questions before we go ahead and do it. Takes away that surprise, which is generally a bad surprise. So the next one is IPR, right? The other thing that we want the patient to be aware of is interproximal reduction. Rarely do I need to use it. Some docs don't use it at all. Other docs use it a ton. And that's a personal preference. We're going to talk about that when we get to IPR. But for now, we just want patients to know at this point, before we've even started treatment, that we may need to use it. And we always say, I always couch the entire conversation by saying, if I do need to use IPR, it's going to be absolute, as minimal as possible. It's not going to hurt the teeth. It's very super conservative. It's the equivalent of taking a little flexible emery board and polishing the teeth to help make a little bit more space because it's so crowded, it's so tight. If it's a spacing case, I don't discuss IPR with them because it's spacing. I'm not going to be doing IPR, right? I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to be closing space. So we don't have to talk about it for spacing cases. The fifth one is refinement. I want patients to know that there's a good chance that I may get some extra aligners to finish the case. This is super important and probably a good thing for us to understand. With previous ortho, with fixed ortho, a lot of times people would say, well, it's really weird because with clear aligners, you have a lot of refinement, and with fixed ortho, you never had refinement. And nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, that's almost like a LOL, laugh out loud thing, because every single time the patient came in, you were doing refinement. It was always refinement, 24/7, start to finish. 365, whatever it is, it was refinement every day of the year. Every time the patient came in, you were always refining. That's what refinement was. The difference between fixed and clear aligners is that with fixed, you never really knew where your end target was. And with clear aligners, you have a digital treatment plan right in front of you that you look at. And with your pro plan, you say, okay, I know I should be done at aligner number 17. You get to 17 and you look, you say, gosh, I would like to get that lateral in a little bit more, or I want to get the bite a little bit more balanced. So you get some extra aligners. The big difference is that patients oftentimes associate the fact that there's 17 aligners with that's the end of treatment. So we always make sure that we say, hey, you're going to have X number of aligners, 17, 21, 6, whatever the number is. But I may have some aligners when we're all done. As a matter of fact, for me personally, there's a good chance I am, because I always like to get the bite really dialed in. And a lot of companies may not want you to do refinement. One of the nice things about using the Candid system is that there's built-in automatic free refinement, so you don't have to worry about paying a price for it. I'll never charge a patient for refinement. It's us being able to get the job done beautifully and right. So we share that fifth one with the patients at this consultation visit. Sixth one is pretty important also. Again, I touched a little bit on it, and that's equilibration, or adjusting the bite. Really super simple. I just love to say, if the teeth fit in a bad bite and I move the teeth, how can they possibly fit? Because I want you to understand that if the teeth fit in a bad bite and you move the teeth, they can't possibly fit. You're going to have to possibly do some adjusting, maybe teeny bit, maybe just a little bit, like with a polishing wheel or burlue wheel. Maybe you're not taking away, but you're adding. Maybe it's a combination of both. The bottom line is, I am talking about right now, just using my hands, two-dimensional, right? Hills and valleys fitting together. Imagine three-dimensional hills and valleys fitting together, and how challenging it would be to make sure that that all matched when you're moving everything around. So to get the best stability, give a case that's going to last a super long time. And I have cases that are 25 years old, as you've heard, that I'd love to show. I'm very proud of to show. Every 5 years we take these photos and are able to show that they're stable. And the reason they're stable is because everything fits together, and I've done an equilibration. Super easy to do. We've got some in module 3 to learn how to do it. And there's some great places to go, including the Pankey Institute and the Dawson Institute, where you can learn about equilibration and how to make sure a bite is balanced. Once you do that, it's just like knocked out of the park, man. It's perfect, which brings us up to the last thing, number 7, which is retention. Retention, as we know, is for life, and this has been a deal breaker for some patients with me. I've gotten through these 6 first things, and then I've gotten to the retention, and I'm at the consult visit, and I say, yeah, and you're going to have to wear a retainer. And they're like, whoa, 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 what do you mean wear a retainer? I'm like, well, if you want to keep the teeth straight, you're going to have just a gentle reminder for them to stay in that position. You're just going to wear it nightly, just at night. Some patients, by the way, are 3 times a week. Some are once a week. Some are once a month. Some patients are literally wearing their aligners once a month. And the goal behind that is it's just a gentle reminder to stay in that position. But it takes a long time for me to get someone to, once a week or once a month. It's going to take years for me to get there. We're going to be every night because we want to just keep the teeth in that healthy, happy position. A couple cool things that you should know is that if a patient ever puts their retainers on and every night they put them on, they're tight, and every morning they wake up and their bite feels different, guess what? Case isn't done. Things aren't done there because the teeth are wanting to move during the day because the bite doesn't match. So if you have that type of situation, it's a little hint that you're going to have to probably get it finished a little bit better to make sure it stays that way. But if you do that and do it right, retention should become something that's simple and acts again just as a reminder. Another analogy I like to use for patients, I think that's important, is I talk about, hey, the rest of your body's changing. Why would you think your mouth isn't, right? So my hair used to be a different color. It's changed to what I'll call salt and pepper. My my body is sagging a little bit. I need glasses, or in this case, contacts, to be able to see up close. Every part of my body's changing. Why would I think my teeth aren't? So I love using that with patients, and also maybe sharing with them that they might be spending more on their hair on an annual basis than they ever would spend on their retainers. With that in mind, we got it now. We understand those 7 things, very super important, and it allows us to get through that initial consultation. We do not want to do this on delivery day. I don't want to have this conversation on delivery day because the patient needs to know about all this stuff before we finish. There are literally some courses that are taught where they say, don't talk about retention until the end of treatment. And I couldn't think of anything worse than that, than to wait until that long to spring that on a patient. So we cover these things at the consultation visit. We reemphasize it at delivery day. And then it's just, again, just a simple fact that we've got all those things done throughout treatment. The only one left is retention at the end. But it gives us a chance to jump in and talk about delivery day. So let's cover that. So you've now gotten these records. You've sent them off. You sent your initial scans off, and you got your treatment plan back, and you looked over your pro plan, and you made some modifications and talked with your orthodontist and got some advice and got the case started. As far as manufacturing is concerned, they manufacture it, they ship it to you, and now what are you going to do? Well, you want to have this again be a very wonderful and exciting appointment for your patient. So you're going to get a pretty big box, and inside it is going to be your aligners, all set up in a beautiful, I think one of the prettiest delivery packages in all the clear aligner space, with the aligners set aside, each one like little, almost like a filing system. And there's a nice case on the other side and some foam whitening mouthwash there, a spray. And then underneath it is your scan box itself. And that's also pretty cool. So you have to lift up the little white thing where the case is, and you'll see underneath it, that scan box called the Scan Box Pro. It's got a retraction tube on it, and then your phone actually mounts into it, and your phone becomes a scanner, which is really crazy. So the key is to make this simple, right, for the patients. And to do that, there's some really great videos to help train the patient on monitoring and how to use it and how to use the app that's associated with it. And it's a pretty intuitive system. But again, we always go over that at delivery visit so that the patient knows. The other things that we'll be doing there is we're going to be putting attachments on possibly, or doing IPR. Again, it's so minimal. We just rarely do it anymore, but I like to make sure we cover it, especially for docs who like to put attachments on, or you may want to. Otherwise, we don't, but we walk through that. We try the aligners in and out. We make sure the patient can put them in and out. We've got a little pull tool that's inside our box as well that we use to help take them out. The pull tool is really nothing more than a number 10 crochet hook, but it's a little rounded plastic thing that can grab on the aligners and pull them out. And one of the reasons that we sometimes need that is the fit is so great with the Candid aligner system that they just, feel like they're stuck on the teeth. They're doing a great job moving. They're very, very gentle, but they feel like, oh, sometimes it might be tough to get off. Most patients can get them off by just slipping a finger up there and pulling them out. Usually the easiest way to do that, by the way, is to slip your finger up on the inside and pull straight down to be able to get them off. Inside that box, you're going to find one other thing that's really, really interesting, and that is a piece of paper. It's a treatment plan. It's a written hard copy of a treatment plan. It's also obviously available digitally. And that treatment plan is going to have all the stuff that you might need to do throughout treatment. It's going to have attachments that might need to go on, places where you might have to do IPR, and extra adjuncts like bite ramps or say hooks and cutouts for buttons and elastics, etc. And all that is in a key on the very bottom of the page. You'll see on each page that there is a little key that tells you what those things are. They're identified on the teeth themselves, and then it tells you what you might be doing at an aligner visit. Super easy way of doing this, probably the easiest in the industry. We'll look at this one example here. There's 19 aligners on the top, 19 aligners on the bottom, and we're going to place attachments on. You'll see a bunch of teeth numbers here, 10, 7, 29, 20, 28, and 21. Those are going to be the teeth that are going to end up with an attachment, and it shows on the tooth as a little blue dot. And then beneath it, you're going to see another kind of grayed out box area where you see a couple other blue dots, but they're not really dots. They're actually more rectangular shaped, and those are actually ramps. So this patient's going to have some bite ramps on the lingual surface of the upper incisors to help correct a deep bite. We'll talk a little bit about that later on, but this is the treatment plan. If you've got paper charts, this is great to just keep in the paper chart. We keep a digital version in our office to go with our digital charts. We always identify what we've done. And if it's a paper chart, what you'll want to do is go ahead and, if there's IPR, mark that you've done the IPR so you don't ever actually repeat it and do too much. Okay, let's look at that scan box and the monitoring. Let's talk a little bit about candid monitoring now. Let's start with just kind of some of the benefits of it. And obviously, the first and foremost benefit is that there's fewer office visits. The amount of time that I'm able to save my patients is crazy. I like to think of it as like the old way I used to do aligners were we deliver on a 2-week basis. And part of the reason for that was I wanted to be sure all the movement was fully expressed. So if we had, in essence, say 24 aligners, that was going to be 48 weeks, about a year, start to finish. And I'd have the patient come in every, 4 to 6 to 8 weeks, usually every 6 weeks. So we'd be doing 3 aligners at a time. And the big reason, again, is I didn't want things to go off track. Well, guess what? If I had the patient come in every 6 weeks for a year, that's 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 times, depending on how long the treatment is. And now consider this. The patient gets in their car. They drive, say, 35 minutes to get to you. They park another 10 minutes. They come on in. They sit in your reception area, not a waiting room, a reception area, and they wait a little bit. And then they go back and they get seated, and you take a peek in their mouth, hand them some extra aligners, and then they turn around and go back and repeat the process. So about 2 hours they spend on this delivery visit. I used to boast about the fact that, hey, it was so super easy. Patient come in, we talk about, the kids playing soccer, where they're going to go on vacation, and, how the renovation's going on the house, whatever it might be. I'd say, yeah, this is a great part about it is they just come in, I hand them aligners, they take a peek. And what actually was happening is I wasn't sometimes paying as close of attention as I should. And I didn't take into consideration that I just wasted 2 hours of that patient's time. Now, it was great because we're a relationship-based practice. We love talking with our patients, but I also respect their time. And nothing could be better than me to give back, if it's, say, 10 visits at 2 hours a visit, an entire day of someone's life given back to them with sleep time built in, just because I'm able to do this remotely. So share that with your patients. The cool advantages of this, it's a game changer. Once you do it, you just can't go back. It's absolutely super and wonderful. It allows me to also stay connected, as we talked about earlier, and therefore the patient is engaged in treatment. So we see less non-compliance. We see less people kind of slip and fall off the wagon with things, because we're able to keep an eye on a regular basis without having to have them come in. It takes them 5 minutes of scanning it maybe once a week. Super easy to do. Because of that, less likelihood of mid-course corrections or crash and burn, end up calling it refinement when really the case went off track on aligner 16 out of 24 or something like that. We try to fight to the end. This is the neat thing about monitoring, and we'll show you how it actually works. And this video is a great way of kind of understanding that.
Welcome. Let's discover how to take a scan. Place your phone in the scan box. Make sure the lens of your camera is clean and visible through the opening of the scan box before securing the system. Take the cheek retractor tube and insert it firmly into the scan box. You'll hear a click when the tube is properly attached. The app will help you adjust the scan box so the tube is centered on the screen. Let's go. Insert the cheek retractor tube, one side first, then the other. Hold it with one hand and hold the scan box with the other hand. The model you see on the screen follows your movements and mouth opening in real time. During the scan, we want to capture all the areas of your mouth. There is a glowing dot for each area. Move the cheek retractor tube and scan all the dots. When you reach for the side dots, turn your head in the opposite direction. When asked to bite down, you can swallow and hold your tongue to the roof of your mouth to make sure your back teeth are in the right position. When the app asks you to open slightly, a small space between your teeth should be visible. The app will help you keep the right opening. The scan will also capture the biting surface of your teeth by scanning up and down, one arch at a time. Only the arch you want to capture should be inside the tube. Use your lips to maintain the tube and tilt the scan box. You can also slightly tilt your head to help you. The app will let you know when you need to insert or remove your aligners. Take the time to seat your aligners correctly before scanning. When you've completed all the steps, remove the cheek retractor tube. You will be able to review your scan before sending it to your doctor. That's it. Now it's your turn to try out your first scan.
So with that in mind, now let's cover just some of the different adjunct features. I'm going to come back and talk a little bit more about monitoring just because it's such a cool thing and it's a game changer for us. And the candid monitoring, by the way, is different than some of the other monitoring systems out there. These are specially developed algorithms that help keep the patient on track. We use really, really cool AI to see that aligners are fitting super tight and super well. We're also monitoring hygiene, which is kind of a cool thing. And finally, we're looking at how well they're complying with the scanning itself. So we collect a ton of data and are able to just share that with the patient, no one else with the patient, and really make sure we stay on track. So some of these other features that we talked about, we know about attachments and IPR, and we talked a little bit about bite ramps. Bite ramps we use to help control a deep bite and correct it. We also can use it as a really cool feature for some patients who need to have some sort of anterior deprogrammer type thing where it's acts as a separator. Sometimes we used to think of these as like a Holly with a bite plane, or what's often called a D-Pass nowadays, helped to develop by John Droder. Pretty cool things, but the idea is these ramps help to separate the teeth. We also have Pontics, obviously, that you can build into teeth, and we'll cover that. And finally, buttons and elastics cutouts that we also can use. So let's jump in with the attachments themselves. We talked a little bit about just the kind of the need for them. And I want, again, to have people understand a little bit more about attachments. So if you think about a tooth being round, like a Coke can, for instance, and you put plastic around that and you try and rotate it, you don't have really much to get good purchase on with something like that. So if you put a handle on it like a teacup, now you create a moment arm that we call in physics. It allows us to be able to rotate that tooth and do other types of movements with the tooth. And we used to think that they are absolutely necessary for all sorts of things, all sorts of movements. We've found that may not necessarily be so. And let's take a look at this little video here to get a better understanding just about attachments and some of the philosophy associated with them. Hi, I'm Brian Gray. I'm the Chief Dental Officer here at Candid Pro. And dental professionals have lots of points of views and lots of philosophies in dentistry, especially when it comes to orthodontics. Something that I love about Candid Pro is that we take those points into account when we're creating products and offering flexible treatment options for our patients, and in particular for our providers to be able to give our patients exactly what they want. But one way that we're approaching this kind of flexibility in clinical applications is through attachments. And attachments, by the way, are those little small blobs of composites that we put on teeth to help facilitate movement with clear aligners. And I know that some doctors swear by attachments and other doctors feel that they're bothersome, but one thing I can tell you for sure, our patients do not really care for them. In my opinion, attachments can improve treatment times in some cases and sometimes improve predictability, but should be reduced or eliminated whenever possible. And I think Candid Pro's done a great job of doing that, of reducing the need for attachments via the really cool innovations that we've seen with the manufacturing and materials, but most importantly with the protocols. We used to think that the attachments were absolutely necessary, like the handle on a teacup to be able to move teeth. We know that that's not necessarily true with the way that we're able to grab teeth with the clear aligners that Candid Pro uses. But with that in mind, we do recommend that in certain cases that you may want to use attachments. And for me particularly, in my practice and my philosophy, if it's greater than 20 degrees of rotation or there's greater than a millimeter of intrusion or extrusion, I probably do want to put an attachment on. So ultimately, we'll respect your clinical opinion, and our goal is to help you generate really, really beautiful results and great outcomes for your patients, and to do that with case setups that have as few attachments as possible. But know that we will follow your preferences. So if you have a particular philosophy or a particular way that you like to do things, attachments are available. And know that they're also always there to answer questions or concerns you have about attachments. I'm also available as Chief Clinical Officer at Candid. I love your input and your feedback, and we'd love to be able to make attachments one of those things that we use as little and as infrequently as possible. But if you need them, they're there. And if you have questions about it, please feel free to reach out, ask your account executive, or contact one of us, including myself, and let's continue to give patients beautiful smiles. So what are the materials that you need to place attachments, right? So attachments, by the way, are not buttons. Buttons are something completely different. Attachments are blobs of composite that we put on the sides of the teeth to help facilitate movement. They can be active, meaning that they're helping to move the teeth themselves, or they can be passive, in which case they're retentive attachments. And the stuff that you typically need is a prophy cup and some pumice. Maybe if you've got it, some micro air abrasion, turn down super low. You want to have some cheek retractors. And again, there's some different ones that are pretty cool to help retract everything, keep it out of the way. We've also got, we'll want to have cotton rolls and some gauze. And then the typical stuff you'd use to do some bonding, right? You can have some composite material, etch, bonding agent, etc., to go ahead and put it on. And then you want to clean it up afterwards. So we use a sickle scaler for that generally, and we're also going to use like 12 fluted ET carbide finishing burrs to help take off any flash. And then finally, we'll get some unwaxed floss just to make sure there's nothing between the contacts, etc. So those are the things that we need. And again, attachments are typically used to help increase predictability. There's really no other reason that we want to put them on the teeth. One of the things that we came up with Candid was to simplify the attachment procedure, not only reduce them, but simplify it. Initially, some of the companies had 1 or 2 types of attachments, then 6, then 12, then, an infinite number, right? Everything from yin yang and teardrop shape and lemon wedges and all sorts of stuff like that. Yeah, great. But we looked at the effectiveness and saw not as much as we thought. And a lot of reasons for that maybe they weren't as optimal as we had hoped them to be. But that's okay. The bottom line is that let's keep it simple. So with us, simple meant let's make an attachment that's going to have a really great active side, the side that's going to do the work. And then the other parts will be the retentive element of the attachment, and make it so that we could put them on easily and make them reproducible easily for us to put just a composite inside a template and get them in place. We could move them around, turn them in different positions, which is great. That's also what we want to do, but keep it simple. One of the frustrating parts for me with the other systems that had really small, again, funny shaped attachments was that the accuracy of the attachment is really controlled by how well it's placed. And if you've got someone who, has these little teeny attachments and there's flash and goo hanging out all around it, it's not doing anything. It's pretty useless. So you need to surgically place your attachments or chisel them, as we like to say. Super easy to chisel something that has really kind of four sides on it and is shaped a little bit like the top of a house, which is what our attachments are. So we love those because they increase predictability for those that want to use them and easy to place. We like to think of, again, these as just a conventional one with really two bevels on it. And they're awesome for things like rotation, intrusion, and extrusion, and for different reasons. Extrusion, it's an active attachment. It grabs onto the tooth itself to help pull it down. Typically, anything more than 1 millimeter is where we start to consider them. And then for intrusion, in this case, let's take a peek at this where we're leveling the curve of speed. We've got someone with a super deep bite. Those anterior teeth, again, they want to touch, right? So they've super erupted up to find a place, a home on the inside of either the top teeth at the cingulum of the upper teeth or maybe even the palate. But you can see a stepped occlusion here. We see that there's a drastic jump in the curve of speed in this case. So what we'd like to do is push those teeth down. We want to get absolute intrusion, push them straight down. We don't want to flare them out. We don't want to procline them to get relative. We want to push those down. In particular, you see some of that recession that we see on tooth number 24. Certainly don't want to procline that because that's not going to help with there already being some bone loss. So direct intrusion means we push them down. Now, this is where it gets a little interesting. A lot of people say, well, oh, okay, we should put attachments on those teeth that we want to push down. And the answer is no. We don't. We actually want to put attachments on the teeth behind it. We want to put it on the teeth adjacent but behind. So in this case, we want to push down teeth 22 to 27, the canine to canine on the bottom, meaning we'll put attachments on the teeth behind it, not because we're trying to move those teeth, but because they're going to act as a retentive element and therefore drive down the front teeth. Think of it this way. We create a spring effect. We grab onto those back teeth and we make the front teeth get pushed down by the aligner itself, but with a good grip on the back. Now, one of the cool things that we've been working on and we're really proud of is reciprocal anchorage, which is where we actually are able to push down those front teeth and get those guys lower and actually get a little bit of extrusion on the posteriors in certain cases where we want to and help to level out that curve of speed. Just a quick thing on the curves of the mouth, as we like to call them. Curve of Spee is when you look sideways, it's the gentle arch that you have from back to front. It should be gentle. And then there's also the curve of Wilson, which goes this way. So you've got a curve in both directions. And Peter Dawson used to like to say that if you took a lacrosse ball and you put it on someone's lower arch, a model of their lower arch, you'd have that ball touching in just one spot all the way around because that basically forms like a globe with those two curves. So we don't want a fully flat curve of Spee, which is something that some orthodontists really like and enjoy. We want the gentle curve because that's what helps to give us the guidance that's so important for anterior movement, right? Anterior guidance, and for side guidance, which is the canine guidance or canine protection. So with that in mind, this is the idea behind attachments, is we like to use that for the different things that are necessary to help move teeth in the right direction, active and passive attachments, as we said. Why does Candid use less? Well, we talked about the cool straight trim design that we've got, the fact that we lock into those embrasure spaces, which is called the gray space, not named after me, but I love the idea. It goes in there and grabs onto that space and helps to retain the liners better and therefore move the teeth better, again, with a pincher effect. And of course, the material and the machines that we use to do it, the carbon printers that we have and the FLX material is great for being able to give us an excellent result. So the combination of those things have really made a difference. Like to back stuff up with good science. So there's a really great study in the AJO journal from 2023, and it talks about the conventional regular attachments versus the optimized ones that are out there, and the fact that just a really well-made horizontal attachment is much more effective than these so-called optimized attachments that again look like lemon wedges or teardrops or stuff like that. So let's go with what works and what we know is going to be effective. We can also put those on so they're virtually invisible, but they do function. The trouble with ones that are really teeny and virtually invisible is that they're invisible. They're not doing anything. So let's stick with what works. Let's talk a little bit about interproximal reduction. So first off, what is IPR? IPR is the removal of interproximal enamel between the teeth, right, to reduce the overall size of the teeth on the mesial distal edges of it. And there are differing philosophies for this. Some philosophies are, yeah, do a ton of it, take away as much as you can. It means that you move the teeth less, you create a bigger contact area, just makes it more stable. Great way to do it. Others are the exact opposite. They're no, enamel's precious. And I don't want to take any off if I don't have to. I mean, there's a reason that it's there. So why would I take it off? I sit right in the middle on that. Like to being from Washington, D.C., I'm the classic politician, and I'm going to take the middle road, which is that I think enamel's precious and I don't want to touch it, but on occasion I need to make things better and more stable for my patients. So I will sometimes go ahead and do it. There are certain names for this. It used to be called disking and stripping and things like that, and we don't like using those terms. So we want to use kind of softer, gentler ones when we're talking with our patients, and polishing or smoothing are some of them. 8-tooth manicure is another, and my favorite is to use the term slenderizing, which sounds just nice and soothing, and yeah, we're going to slenderize that tooth and make it prettier for you. So it gives us a chance to, again, take off a little bit of enamel to help make space. Let's cover now some of the reasons that we might want to do that. Well, the biggest first is that there oftentimes is what we call Bolton two-size discrepancy between the upper and lower arch. And again, this gets into the bigger, deeper thing of anthropomorphological theories of jaw development and tooth eruption. But for us, the bottom line is that if the teeth don't match like the lid in the jar, because say the laterals in particular are smaller in shape and in size, then you're either going to have spacing up top or a lot of crowding on the bottom. Because remember, the lid and jar are going to touch each other. The teeth want to touch. So one thing we can do is some IPR in the lower arch to help alleviate some of that crowding and bring those top teeth together. So that's just kind of one reason, is the Bolton discrepancy, and we're compensating for the lack of tooth structure in one arch by taking away tooth structure in another arch. Yeah, it's okay, but I'd rather look at some other ways of solving that. Orthodontists typically kind of have to do that because they don't do a lot of restorative, but for us as GPs, what could be better than to set the teeth up in the right position and then place the missing material back via either composite bonding or maybe some ceramic material, like doing some veneers or something like that. Well, also we can look at this when we need to do some expansion, but we don't want to create excessive space. Maybe there's periodontal concerns, or we can't do it because there's the presence of implants and we have to limit how much we're going to be able to move teeth. It could be fixed bridges as well, but teeth that typically can't move, so we have to work around them. Maybe we want to do some IPR to help address that. Another reason might be as if there's excessive overjet. Maybe we want to do some IPR on the top to help bring those top teeth back a little bit to help close overjet. These are some of the different reasons that, again, doctors might look at doing it. If there's a lot of flaring or crowding, we might want to do it, as we discussed. And then there's a really neat aesthetic reason to do this, and that is if there's a presence of a black triangle. Black triangles are appear between teeth down at the gum line where the gum has receded, and you'll see a little space, and then we call it black triangle because it looks like a black triangle. A couple important things about this. First off, we can do some IPR to help reduce it, because what we do is we take some enamel off the sides of the teeth, and then we can bring those teeth together, and it lowers the contact closer to the gum. That's the first thing about this. But let's cover the kind of 2 points that are really important. One is, how does a black triangle occur and how can you get rid of it? So a black triangle occurs because there's not enough bone to support the gum in between those teeth. And we know that there's a special number. The most conservative one that we like to use is 4 millimeters. So we call it the 4 millimeter rule. And that means if you can make the space between the subjacent contact point, the bottom of the contact, and the level of the bone be 4 millimeters or less, you'll fill that with gum. So we can look sometimes and predict whether or not we can correct that space, that little black triangle, by doing some IPR, bringing teeth together, get that contact down, shorten the amount of distance between the contact point and the bone. So 4 millimeters is the number. Some you'll see again, AACD, sometimes they'll say 6 millimeters. Hygiene is a factor with this. And again, shape and contour of teeth and the emergence profile make a difference. But bottom line is, we'll say that 4 millimeters is a good thing. Now, here's the second part, and this is super important. We're going to go a little bit sideways here because I want you to understand a very important concept, and that is you can sometimes create black triangles for patients that haven't had them prior to orthodontic treatment. And that occurs in two different scenarios. One, where there's a lot of spacing between the teeth. So imagine a diastema. Teeth are way apart. We bring those teeth together. When we bring those teeth together, the bone between those teeth is flat, right? It was flat to begin with. We bring them together. It's still flat. There's no little interdental spicule of bone that sticks up to support gum tissue. So you close the diastema, you still may have a little gap there, and that's because there's no bone to support it. Bone needs a reason to exist. It didn't exist because the teeth were spread out. You bring it together, it's still not going to, you're not going to create a little interdental spicule of bone there. So it's flat and you have a black triangle. And sometimes patients will close the diastema and they'll be like, gosh, I thought this was going to be gone. And now I still got this little gap up here. It whistles and stuff like that. No problem. You can fill it with some bonding, some composite. The other time we see this is when the teeth are overlapped and there's a lot of crowding, and we separate those teeth, we bring them apart. And as we bring them apart, guess what? There's no bone. There was no bone when they were right against each other and everything was crowded on the bottom. You spread it out. There's still no bone. It's going to be flat there. It's going to go down to the lowest level that's going to line up with the horizontal of the other bone levels in the teeth as far as the alveolus is concerned. And you end up with another black triangle. So if you've got a lot of crowding and you resolve it, you need to be sure to let the patient know before you start that they could have some black triangles, and you may need to address it via a restorative solution. No problem, you can do that. People often say, wow, is that a candid thing? And the answer is no, it's not a candid thing. It's not even a clear aligner thing. That is an ortho thing. That is the moving of the teeth that causes that black triangle. So if it's already present, it probably is because the patient's older and they've had some recession, or because the teeth have a really, really big contour on them and they've created that little gap there. Easy again to address. Restorative solution is what we typically want to do. Some other times we might want to do some IPRs if there's interferences in the front teeth and we want to bring the bottom ones back. We'll do some IPR to get those bottom ones out of the way. And that helps to resolve mandibular entrapment, as we call it, or a collapsed envelope of function. Pucelt came up with the idea of the envelope of function or envelope of motion, and a super cool thing. Talk about the best in biomechanics. If you look at that, it looks like a little shield, and that shield is a representation of the protection our mouth has. It's the way that little shield fits and works. So Pucelt's envelope of motion, super important for us to be able to have a patient function properly. If it's collapsed, if it's shrunk down because the mandible's trapped, you're going to see all sorts of issues. In particular, TMD is one of the big things. So what are some of our goals that we want to accomplish with IPR? Well, first off, we want to create space so that the teeth can move properly, right? We don't want to create too much space so that there's extra, right? That's not a good goal. That's a bad goal. We want to preserve the natural shape of teeth. I want it to, when I do this IPR, it should look the same as far as contour is concerned as it did before I did any. It should not be flat across, right? It should be rounded and curved, just like teeth are rounded and curved. I love to say that there's no right angles in the human body, right? There's no flat right angles. There's curves to everything, and that's part of nature. So we want to represent that. So if you go through with a disc, for instance, and we'll cover this in more detail, if you go through with a disc and you make two flat surfaces, That's not how teeth should look, right? You need to get in there and actually round them a little bit to recreate the proper contours. It also keep the floss from getting stuck on them. So another good reason there. Why else would we want to have IPR? What's some other goals? Well, we want to be able to, again, make sure the teeth are lined up and the contacts are in good position. And if we do that, that means we should never take away so much enamel that it's going to be sensitive. So you should never need anesthetic for IPR. You should always remain in the enamel, not in the dentin. Never violate the enamel to create ledges or cuts in the enamel. You want it to, again, look and feel like a tooth. So our goal should be natural looking, never need anesthetic, enough space to move teeth, but not so much that we're going to have extra there. And it should be a relatively easy procedure for the patients. When we do IPR, we want to also start by assessing, do we need to do it? Is it something do we need to do, even if it's required somewhere in mid-treatment? Do we have the space to do it? Is there already enough space there that we don't need to do it? Are we doing it in the right spot? Because we're very, very specific with Candid. When we do IPR, it is going to tell you three things: how much, where, and when. It's going to say, for instance, do 0.2 millimeters between teeth 23 and 24 before aligner 10. So you got all the information there. What it's not telling you is which tooth. So you could say it's 0.2 millimeters. You could do it all on 23, all on 24, half and half, however you want. That's the part of the art and science. And that's the art of you looking at it and deciding which is going to be best. We're also going to make sure the patient's prepared. Remember, we talked about that at the informed consent visit before we even started taking records, right at the very beginning. And we did it again at the initial delivery. We want the patient to know about the benefits and the reason for doing it. I never want a patient to leave my office saying, oh my God, he was sawing on my teeth. It was terrible. We love using strips, which we're going to talk about right now, because there are different materials that you can use to help move teeth, and by creating space, and that IPR space, you have to have some sort of grit that's going to take it off. So diamond strips are my favorite way of doing it. I love getting in there and using those. You can use those with different hand ones. They're called ortho strips and quick strips that get in there. Also hand pieces, both slow and high speed. We'll look at those in a little bit. I also want to have some other materials that are super important. One is some gauges to measure and make sure I take off the right amount of tooth structure, usually minimal, never more than 0.5, a half a millimeter between teeth. We'll never see that. And almost always a lot less. And then finally, a really high-tech thing that you want to have, floss. I want you to have some floss handy for checking two things. One, that you've done the right amount of IPR and you're able to get it to pass through freely. And two, that there's no ledges or no incorrect contours on the tooth that cause the floss to hang up, because that patient won't be happy if they have that. So covering the materials again, we're looking at this one slide where in the upper left, we see manual finishing strips. These are metal strips. They're one-sided safety strips, they call them. They've got there's different types. There are ones that have nothing in the very middle part, and so you can slide it down between the teeth and then run it on either side. There are ones that are double-sided, by the way, and there are ones that are perforated, right? Those are typically called Lightning or Vision Flex strips that are perforated. They're nice because they kind of pick up the mud, the enamel mud, as you're doing it. You see up in the upper left-hand corner of that top left picture some little hand strips there, those little finger strips, and those again are ortho or quick strips made by a bunch of different companies. Contact Ease makes some great ones for that. I want to just share with you something else here. You're looking at these strips, and we put them in order, two different types here. The right ones are the Vision Flex ones with the holes in them. The left ones are solid, of those 6 strips there. But you'll look and you'll notice the colors. There's yellow, red, and blue, right? It's for colors that we see there. They represent the thickness of those strips themselves. And it's not measured by actually the thickness of the metal, but by the thickness of the grit that's glued on the strip, the diamond dust that's glued on the strip. So yellow is 0.08, red is 0.1 millimeters, and blue is 0.125 or 0.13. Some people round it up. That tells us that if we wanted to take off, say, 0.3 millimeters between two teeth. We'll say 8 and 9 up top here. What I would do is I go in with the yellow strip and I break the contact because it's a real fine strip and I can break the contact. I've now made 0.08. I then go in with the red, that's again 0.1, and then I go in with the blue, which is 0.125. Now I go back with the red and I fold it over so it's two thicknesses, and I can twist it if I want to have a safety side and a cutting side if I only want to do one, but if I'm doing both sides, it's fine. I fold it over, it's now 0.1 plus 0.1 or 0.2 thickness, right? And I go through and I polish so that passes through freely. I do the same with the blue, that takes me up to 0.25. And then finally I take the blue and I slide it between the red, fold it over, and I've worn down some of that diamond dust on there, but that's basically 0.1 plus 0.125. It's really less than that because you've worn that down, and it's about 0.3. Go ahead and pass that through lightly. Check it with our little gauge, and you've taken off 0.3 between two teeth. Super easy and accurate. I'm able to take those and round the edges, so I'm not creating a straight slot, which I don't like to do. Top right will create the straight slot. That's a disc, slow speed disc. It can come either straight, which is the type that we're used to seeing, or you'll see the left part of the picture. It shows a contra angle. Those are from Axis. They're perforated super thins. They come in usually anywhere from 12 to 14 to 16, even 18 millimeters that allow you to be able to cut. We also have oscillating handpieces that kind of vibrate back and forth. But the nice thing about discs is that you're able to take off a lot. The not nice thing about discs is that you're able to take off a lot, meaning it happens quickly and all of a sudden you're like, ah, crap, I took off too much, which is a bummer. We don't want to do that. So I'm reticent to use discs. The second thing about them is they create a super flat space between the two teeth. It's flat like two bricks. And you have to go in there and contour it anyway with the slow speed strips. So I tend to not like it because of that. But there's one other thing I don't like, and that is the tendency for discs to what we call grab and jump. And grab and jump means that you're using it between the teeth. It grabs on the tooth and then it jumps out, it spins out. And that can be real dangerous because it can cut stuff like soft tissue real quickly. We always want to have a disc rotating in towards the tongue. And the reason is I can stop it before it gets to the tongue when it jumps. But when it's spinning out, I can't stop it sometimes before it gets to the lip. And you don't want to get your suture kit out for this. It's kind of messy. So yeah, discs, they're there, they're available to use, but I tend to stick with strips. And that brings up the high-speed burr. What about that? Well, the high-speed burr is even quicker and can be more messy. What you're looking at is a Mosquito Diamond there. That's a SS White 55000 or similar. And the trouble is that they're 0.2 or 0.3 at the tip, but they're up to a millimeter at the base, and all of a sudden you've blown open a contact that you didn't want to. So I rarely, if ever, use the high speed, but everyone has their own preference, and we're showing all the different types here. Again, there's other things like the oscillating ones that we can use too. They're made by Cavo has a handpiece that makes those and uses them well. So after we've done the IPR, we want to check it, and we'll use these little gauges. These are little gap gauges that come in tenths of millimeters, and we're able to slide them through. You don't take two gauges and kind of double them up. All you do is each gauge is a different size. So if you want to get 0.3, you take one with 3 little notches on it and slide it through there and make sure it passes through freely. And doing that would tell you you've taken off the right amount. Now there's a thing that you got to keep in mind, that you're saying you've taken off the right amount if the teeth were just barely touching when you started your IPR. If there was already a gap, well, now you've possibly done more than you need to. So with that in mind, again, you're going to assess where and when and how much IPR might be necessary. Use the gauges. Always stay conservative. Do less than more because it's easy to do a little extra when you're done. Love one of my favorite sayings in dentistry. It's easy to take off and it's hard to put on. So let's be slow about taking off. When we're using that diamond strip, again, gentle passes through. And if you start with the yellow one, the super fine one, the patient doesn't get that fingernails on the chalkboard type feeling with it. It's a little bit gentler. So we'll go ahead and go through there. Sometimes I'll even use the Softflex plastic strips to just finish. I'll just run those through to make sure I've got a nice smooth contour. I'm not afraid, by the way, to do IPR on restorations. As a matter of fact, it's one of my favorite places to do IPR. So an over-contoured crown or an old amalgam that I in particular know I'm probably going to replace, like nothing makes me happier than looking at a MO amalgam on tooth number 28, because I'll go there all day long and take away amalgam if I need to create some space. It's a great spot to do it. And lastly, the flossing confirmation. Remember, we're going to go in and check with that floss, make sure that it passes gently and freely. It doesn't get hung up on anything. We're going to write down our IPR information either digitally in our electronic chart or paper in our manual chart. Some folks also just keep all those treatment plan sheets together in a folder in the lab, and they just grab the folder out whenever they're working with a specific patient. So whatever works for you is great. It gives us a chance to now jump to bite ramps. So we talked a little bit about those earlier. Bite ramps actually really come from something that is from fixed ortho. We had for years used these little metal brackets on the inside of the teeth. We'd glue them on. We oftentimes called them turbos. They were, or bite planes or blocks. There's lots of different names we use for them, but they separated the teeth, allowed us to be able to work with posterior occlusion, and actually also help to intrude anterior teeth for a deep bite. So they're situated primarily to help disclude teeth in the anterior. We could place them on the centrals, the laterals, or the canines, and pretty much any combination of that. Our ramps in particular are designed so that they move with the lower teeth. If we're intruding the lower teeth, they're going to move down with them and follow them so that there's always some sort of touching that occurs. There's also some specifics. You can't put on bite ramps if you've got such a big overjet that the lower teeth aren't going to contact them. So we'll look at those and want to see that they're in the right position. On your Pro Plan, they're going to show up as a purple color on your viewer, on your treatment plan viewer. So awesome little tool to use. And a very important thing that you want to keep in mind is when you see bite ramps, they are in the plastic itself of the aligner. You are not putting composite on the inside upper surfaces of the teeth as you would with the old turbos when we had fixed, like that bottom right picture where you see the metal ones glued on the teeth. No, we don't do that. We just use the aligners themselves to act as the bite ramp in a situation like this. So the patient, when they take them out, is able to close completely and properly. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to. So bite ramps do not get added to the teeth like attachments would. And again, you use a template to place those attachments, and you would not have a template to go ahead and put the bite ramps on. You'll see them to help correct super deep bites. They're a great way to help with the intrusion. You're still going to probably want to have your retentive elements on the bicuspids of the lower teeth if you're pushing down those front teeth. A little bit on elastics now. Elastics are commonly called rubber bands, and that's what they are, is little loops of rubber bands. We use those to help create better angle classification and better cuspal relationships via sagittal movement. This is again where we're looking at a nice type of movement where we're going to bodily move the teeth through the bone. We don't want to tip. So we'll use little elastics, and you can see there's a whole pile of them, but I'm showing 5 sizes because there's the different sizes and there's also different strengths, right? There's in essence like a light, a medium, and a heavy that we use. In this case, we're showing them in a class 2 correction. So this is called class 2 elastics. And you'll see that there's, in essence, what we're showing is a purchase point as those black dots. That could be a button on the bottom, not an attachment, but a button itself on the bottom. Or it could be a hook in the plastic of the aligner that we use to grab onto it. Either way, you've got this elastic that's working to pull the top teeth backwards and the bottom teeth forwards to help correct a class 2 relationship. It's a really cool targeted force that works together to help move the teeth in the proper direction. This is class 2. This is class 3. On the bottom here, you'll see now the opposite, right? We've got the upper purchase point on the maxillary first molar and the lower on the canine. The opposite of what you had on the top. Class 3, the goal here is, as you can see with those arrows, we're going to try and move the top teeth forward and the bottom teeth back to help correct a class 3 bite. So the next question that's often asked is, what size elastics do we use? And it's a loaded question because it obviously depends on how much space there is between the two purchase points. But I'll give you a couple general rules of thumb. One is that 1/4 quarter-inch mediums, which are 4 ounces, are generally will work great. You can have tons of those around. They're going to work. People can get those on without too much difficulty, and they'll do their job. The other way to do this is something called the rule of 3. And the rule of 3 is you take the total distance between those two purchase points and divide that by 3. Right. So if it was say again, let's just say it was 3/4 of an inch, then 1/4 would be perfect because 3/4 of an inch divided by 3, right? But if it was 1.5 inches, you want to use 1/2 because 1.5 divided by 3 would be a 1/2 inch. So that's just a good way to do it, the rule of 3. But otherwise, just if you go with quarter, 4 ounce, you're going to probably be fine. 1/4 4 ounce to be able to move them. It's important that we follow a couple rules. One is that the elastics only work if you're wearing them, and wearing them should be 24 hours a day. You should have them in all the time. Every time you take an aligner out, you want to put a new elastic on. You don't want to use an old one because it fatigues. Just the elastic's not doing what it used to. So constantly, give them bags and bags of the elastics. It just helps them to move the teeth quicker and sooner, and it's definitely worth the $1.50 that it costs you to do that. So we load them up with them and say, every time you take them out, we want you to put them in to help new ones in to help move the teeth quicker. That typically they will start with the first aligner. We'll get started with them right away so that we can get the patient in the correct habit and also get things moving right away. The buttons themselves can be different. They can be all different types. So typically you've got the metal ones, which are curved or flat. And that's for the receptacle surface that sits on the tooth and is bonded on. You can have hooks, which are in essence bent to be able to get the elastics on and off easily. And you can have plastic ones. They can be composite buttons that are tooth colored. Patients typically like those better because they don't show as much. You have to use obviously good bonding techniques to put any of these on. And finally, we've got the last little, if you get in a jam technique, and that is what we call a snowman. If you ever do not have a button, don't freak out. Don't worry. You can create one yourself. You're just going to get some flowable. You're going to do a little bit of etch and a little bit of bonding. And then you're going to go ahead and take some flowable composite and you literally put a blob down, you cure it. You put a second blob down and you cure it. Put the third blob down and move it a little bit away from whichever way the elastic is going to be put on. So it's like a snowman that's kind of tilting over, like kind of falling over to the left a little bit. So it helps to hold it in place. We just, again, if we don't have it handy, we'll make a snowman and put that on and that'll hold, and they work great with the elastics to help accomplish the exact same goal as the buttons themselves. So again, we've got that rule of 3 that we want to keep in mind. We've got class 2, which is pulling the bottom jaw forward, and class 3, which is pulling the bottom jaw back. And those are the basics of using elastics to help move teeth. As discussed, we cover this in more detail and covers kind of some of the cool tricks with it, both in our all-day Care 2 course, and we've got a nice module on elastics, buttons, hooks, and cutouts for our Care 3 advanced level stuff as well. That brings us to Pontics. Kind of the last thing here is the virtual Pontic. It's one of the coolest things about clear aligners is that we can put a tooth in when one's missing. It's funny, we used to use flippers all the time, acrylic with a denture tooth on it to cover up a space. And almost everyone loves to have Pontics nowadays built into their aligners and use that instead. They are determined, by the way, by how much space you have, and then we use a Pontic library to put the Pontic in. But if there's at least 4 millimeters of space, it will be tooth-shaped. Otherwise, it'll be more kind of just if it's less than 4 millimeters, it's say 3, it's going to look more like just a fin between two teeth there. So they'll automatically put those in. If you ask for one in particular, they're going to use it as a placeholder to help fill the space, which then can be filled with material to help make it look more natural and tooth-like. On your Pro plan, on your digital treatment plan, you will see those show up as a little kind of gray colored tooth that's actually filling a space, right? There's not a tooth there, but it looks like it's a virtual tooth on your Pro plan. And in the aligner, it will look identical to that. It's actually designed off of it. Filling it is another story. There's tons of different ways you can fill that space. You can use a little bit of flowable composite. You can use ortho wax if you want. There are different things like Perfecta Smile, and John Schefferman's got a really cool system, Schefferman's a Pontic material. It's like a wax again, and you could put it in and you can actually take it out and move it from one aligner to the next, which is super easy. One of the things you don't want to do is overfill that Pontic space, because it can inhibit the tooth movement of the teeth next to it on either side. So if you're going to use composite, typically leave it short on the side so it doesn't touch interproximally. Another little secret is if you do want to use composite in there, which definitely looks the best of all of them, we use flowable. We will go ahead and micro etch the intaglio surface of that aligner to roughen it up, and then we'll put some bonding agent on there, cure that, and then we put just a thin layer of the tooth-colored flowable material to fill the space. We go ahead and typically do like all the teeth ahead of time. We just line them up and we do a little assembly line type technique to do it. But lots of other things that you can use. There's also things called Pontic paint. So lots of options here to fill that Pontic space and make it look nice for our patients. It brings us to now talking about our appointment checklist and we do our delivery. So again, super important. I can't emphasize how important it is that we have everything ready, lined up. The patient comes in and is psyched to start this journey. We don't want this to be rushed. We want to make sure we explain everything to them. So we always have a checklist out. And first thing we're going to do is go over, talk about what we talked about at the consultation, our informed consent, those 7 things that we discussed. Make sure the patient is aware of them. If there's no IPR in the case and there's no attachments, I don't talk about those because I'm not doing them. So we'll leave those ones out. There might only be 5 things that we talk about, but we certainly do talk about things like equilibration and adjusting the bite and retention. Make sure the patient's aware of that. We then have them download the Candid Monitoring app, our Pro Monitoring app, which is the app that they use to be able to have us track what's going on and to be able to use the AI to see that things are fitting properly. We'll download that with them. Sometimes we'll have them download it in advance. We show them how the records visit, how to do that. But otherwise, we just do it. It takes less than a minute to be able to grab the app and go ahead and put it in. Gives the patient a chance to visualize and see how easy it is to get into it. And now we're going to go ahead, if we're going to put attachments on, we're going to go ahead and do that. The first thing we do is we try the template in and make sure it fits really well. It seats completely. It should have 0 space, 0 gaps when it's seated. If it does, then we know we're in good shape. If it doesn't, we'll stop there and we'll go ahead and grab the first aligner and see that that's seating properly. Because that template for the attachments is identical. It's a 0 aligner, meaning there's no movement in it at all. So that's why it should fit really well. The number 1 aligner obviously has a little bit of movement in it, so you might have that not seat completely, but it gives you a good idea of what's going on. So we'll go ahead and rinse it just to get it a little lubricated, then we try it in. It's a lighter plastic, like an 010 thickness, so it's more flexible, easy to get on and off. The patient's going to go ahead and slip that in, and or we're going to slip it in and we're going to make sure that it fits all the way. We're going to look and see where the attachments are, and then we're going to go ahead and place the attachments, and we'll walk through kind of the steps for that. And then we will go ahead and perform any IPR that's necessary if it's due at that first stage. Again, if it's not, we're not going to do IPR. Then we kind of get to a real important thing, especially if we put attachments on. We have the patient take out the aligners in front of us there so that they don't get all freaked out and are sure that they can do it. Again, it's a great fit. It's one thing you're going to find with the Candid system is that the aligners fit so well. It just means that we're getting really effective movement. It's something that the patients love. But first time to do it, they might be a little shocked to see how well they adhere to the teeth, how well they fit. And so we'll make sure that they're comfortable with it. We typically hold a hand mirror in front of them, or we have them stand up and look at the mirror, and then we'll evaluate whether or not we need to use the little pull tab to be able to get them off if necessary. But that usually will take care of it. We review home care instructions, make sure we go over those in really good detail with the patient to understand exactly what's going on. In particular, things like we don't want them, they can drink water, but I don't want them drinking really sugary stuff while they're doing it. And I don't want them drinking any stuff with dye in it. I'll usually say if it's going to stain a white shirt, like a white t-shirt, then it's going to, stain the aligners and it's going to make your teeth look ugly. So cranberry juice, red wine, grape juice, stuff like that, coffee even. Patients need their coffee. So typically I like, drink the coffee and then before you put things back in, swish your mouth out with water if you can't get a quick brush in. Or if you must drink coffee, drink it through a straw. That might make it a little bit easier, but we try and discourage that if we can. And some patients are like, well, what about my wine? I'm like, switch to white. You gotta have, you're gonna be drinking a lot of Chardonnay. And if you're a whiskey person, you're gonna switch to a vodka or something like that. But the idea is that we want them to keep those aligners in good shape. We're changing weekly. You can change weekly to 2-weekly, depending on what you want to set. And you can do in your monitoring, adjust that as well to whatever you're comfortable with. We've designed ours so that we can change them every week. If we ever have something that hangs us up and it's not fitting properly, the cool thing is that the app will tell me, and in which case they'll have to hold in an aligner. We'll see that in a little bit. But I don't have to write dates on bags, which I used to do is, scribble the date on all the different bags. And then if the patient, fell off the wagon for a week and everything was off, then you have to wipe it off the bag and put a new date on the bag. No, let's do this digitally. This is the beauty of it. So we're going to go ahead and just make sure they know when the next date is and make sure they know how to use the app, and it'll tell them what they need to do next. Finally, we will discuss next appointment. We've covered the remote monitoring already. We've covered how they're going to kind of keep things together. And next appointment, almost always for us, this is crazy. Almost always it's just their hygiene visit. I'm like, all right. And I glance over at the screen. It's got, our software's got the next hygiene visit in it. So I'll be like, hey, I'll see you in September. That's the next time I got to see you. But I want you to know, I'm going to be stalking you. I'm going to be looking at you every week. Make sure things are working. So please do your part. If you're not, you're going to hear from me, which is the beauty of using the monitoring, is that initially they'll hear with a kind of generic response, but I can send personalized ones anytime I want. It's a really great open system, super easy to use. But the cool part is I get to say, hey, I'll see you at your cleaning visit. And when you do, we'll be able to look at things and just make sure you're tracking. But remember, I'm looking at you every week. So if there's any issues, we'll know. We'll be talking to each other. Otherwise, the next appointment will be when we actually finish treatment, take them off or go from there. And that pretty much completes that initial delivery day visit. Again, super important for us. We want to be able to make sure that the patient is happy and comfortable in starting this journey, and we want to get them going on a really great, really great start. Okay, now we're into the monitoring part. So let's talk a little bit about monitoring. Well, first off, let's cover the benefits, right? I've discussed this, already, but I want you to understand the cool things that are associated with this. And there's really 3. One is that Candid monitoring drives compliance. And it does that by making sure that the patient is wearing aligners because they've got this thing over their head that they, need to stay on track. And it's just a gentle reminder, as I like to say. The next thing is that it optimizes chair time for both the patient and for me, and it boosts engagement. So when we think about the driving compliance thing, it's the fact that the patient knows that we're looking, and optimizing the chair time is, again, I said, is a typical visit. We're saving them all like a typical treatment. We're saving them like a day of their life. And then the engagement, just to boost the engagement. Neat thing about that is that the patient weekly is looking at their progress, and it's really great because of the other systems, they'd be like, I don't really know if I'm seeing anything going on. With the Candid system, not only do they see this on a weekly basis, but they get this little really cool video, a movie reel of the progress of their teeth. We'll look at that in a little bit. So as far as the experience is concerned, the app lets them stay in constant communication. We like to think that the accessibility is so much better. It's, again, one of the few things in healthcare where we've really improved accessibility. And with the patients being fully engaged, it helps to keep compliance up to snuff is the way we'd like to. Been some really great studies, but the Graham Duncan study is probably one of my favorites, looking at just the difference between his control group of ones that didn't monitor and then ones that did monitor. And he found that the amount of office appointments was cut by 2/3. He found that the staff utilization, the amount of time saved with the staff, was the equivalent of almost a full day of work for each case, right? It was like 6 hours, I think it was 6 hours. That refinements were cut down, again, from what was for him was 9 out of 10 down to like less than 2 out of 10. And that finally the duration of treatment cut way down. This is the thing that's really cool about the monitoring that we haven't really discussed, is that because it stays on track so much better, we see a lot less length of time for treatment because we're able to keep things going. And I'll show you where that really plays out when we look at this in a little bit of detail. But if we look at just the predictability, you can see, see here that for this case, with this diastema case, we're going to go ahead and address that diastema in 10 aligners. I want you to look at how we actually corrected some of the deep bite to help solve that diastema issue without getting a posterior open bite. This woman was able to get through treatment in less than 6 months, in matter of fact, less than 5 months. And those little green circles mean that she had a pass each time she scanned. The red box at the start was, in essence, we have a kind of a default to make sure we get the train moving all the way. So you'll see a red box at the start to just say, hey, you scanned, you're going to stay in your first aligners for the next, stay in this aligner for 2 weeks and then scan again with the number 1 aligner in. So we look at another case, a crowding case. You can see simple crowding, again, super simple here, less than a half a year. 10 aligners, had a little extra one at the end there to get through, where she just wore it a little longer, but was able to get through treatment without any trouble. Here, though, on the bottom one, let's look at the deep bite. So I want you to notice here that first off, we had a refinement. So you'll see that it shows 16 aligners for the initial visit, and then we had 11 aligners for a refinement. There was just one refinement. It was 11 aligners long. But we're going ahead and correcting a deep bite, some crowding. We see a lot of lingual inclination with these teeth. Most importantly, if you look at that little timeline there, you see that there was some red boxes, right? Those were areas where things stopped. And that is super important. And the reason it is that those cases where we would have missed the fact that things weren't tracking, it would have kept on getting worse and worse, and it would have crashed and burned. And we basically kind of zeroed back in at things that weren't really fitting well. We zeroed back in. Things weren't fitting well. We zeroed back in. Let's look at that in a couple slides, just again up close. But let's look at some other examples of how predictable things are. Another less than 6 month case where we're going to go ahead and correct a crossbite. You can see that canine number 27 is out. We're able to bring that in and line things up in less than 6 months. End up with a really nice smile. We're also going to correct a little bit of a deep bite as we do that. And then some more advanced cases where we've got a tremendous amount of flaring here at both top and bottom arches. We've got a little bit of loss of vertical. We're going to bring those guys in. That's going to actually give us relative extrusion, right? It's going to make the teeth longer as we bring those guys in. And we're going to consolidate the gaps and everything between those teeth to create a nice space for an implant when we're all done. So it gives us a chance to plan for an implant. I have to share with you cases like this one where I went ahead and was straightening out the teeth. We knew that this case was going to be probably more than 6 months, but initially, and have a refinement possibly in there. But things gathered up. We didn't need a refinement. We went ahead and placed the implant 4 months before we were done with the aligners because we knew exactly where things were going to go. And we're able to use, again, it's like surgically guided. We're able to use the aligner itself as a surgical guide for placing the implant. In this case, we obviously did CBCT 3D analysis so that we could really be sure. But the super cool thing about it is I can use the previous aligner and use that as my pilot to be able to make sure that the implant is placed exactly where we want it to be. Narrow arches, again, widening them. You can look at a case like this where we had 16 aligner stages. So it's going to, again, be less than 3/4 of a year. And we're able to round out the arches, make them look nice and full, give a place for the tongue. So talking a little bit more just about the monitoring and how it improves compliance, let's take a look at just the technology itself. So first off, one of the neatest things is that this is the #1 rated app in teledentistry, the Candid Pro app. It's easy to navigate. The scan box is super cool. It's easy to just rinse it off and put it away when you're done with it. Comes with a nice little velvet bag that you can keep it in. The retraction tube is super easy to use. I'll show you in just a second. And it pretty much holds every single phone out there so that we're able to get something that's really accurate. When we look at this app, I want to now, this slide's going to look really full, but there's so many cool things that I want to share with you. So I want to kind of let you know how I'm able to communicate with the patient and make this so seamless. Again, elegantly simple. The first thing is we've got these really great reminders, right? We're able to have the patient stay reminded of what's going on, and that keeps them engaged, but not nearly as engaged as these behavioral reinforcements. So we, in essence, have badges, right? We've gamified this system where the patient now is monitoring and they're like, oh, geez, I want to get a good, I want to get a good hygiene score. I want to put the apple on the teacher's desk type of thing. And the reinforcements help us to do that. If they're struggling with something, I need to be able to have good educational resources for them. So there's great training and support that we can do to help them understand what's going on and why we're doing it and why they may be having trouble. It's got to be super easy to use, right? And that means that when they plug it in and put it in their mouth, I want them to have everything be seamless so that, again, my 70-year-old patients who are not used to even using phones can be able to use this. And sure enough, they do. They love it. They're able to have an app that tells them when and how and what and whether or not they've done a good job scanning. They're able to use that scan box and look in the mirror so they can see that they're doing the right thing and moving it in the right direction. All the information is there. Again, super easy to use. You can see that little GIF playing there, and our young lady going ahead and moving the scan box to go ahead and capture all the teeth. Some really, really cool things about this. You can see that it's showing, yeah, you did it, you got it there. But we're able to use this now also for tracking and to see how things are looking in a 3-dimensional view. Some of the cool R&D that we're working on that we're real excited about is how we're going to be able to use this to save time even on refinements. More on that later. Finally, I'm going to bring up the whole rest of the right side of the screen here, and this is to show you kind of why this is so cool. Remember I talked about the green circles to go and the red boxes, which is a no-go, and the fact that you need to rescan. This is where we used to just go dead in the water with the old systems, and that was that we would go ahead and look at someone's teeth, and then they disappear for 6 weeks or maybe 8, and they'd move ahead, but the aligner wasn't completely fitting, and then things would go a little bit off track, and then they'd go to the next aligner and things would be even more off track. And then typically they get frustrated and they stop wearing them. Like when you look at this and you see a situation like this where there's spit bubbles inside the aligner, that means no good. That's a no-go, man. That's not fitting. It's no longer doing its job. It's off track and that's never going to fit. So we're too far along to turn things around when we see something like this. We want to catch this earlier. Also, though, I want to get a little kind of heads up on how the hygiene is. How are they doing with their hygiene? So the other cool AI feature is that this will tell us how well they're doing. If there's spinach between their teeth, it's certainly going to pick that up, but It actually will look at plaque and determine how well they're doing as far as keeping things clean. So the idea is if I can keep this on track early on, if I can see that we're keeping things on track, I now have just saved 6 weeks of not knowing it was going off track and then taking new records and waiting another 4 to 6 weeks to get the refinement or mid-course correction aligners in. That's 3 months of dead time that I had because I didn't have something that could catch it early on. So again, the cool thing about monitoring is we catch it early. We look at this case here where we're, again, scrolling through, looking at the movements. We're noticing that on aligner number 7 and aligner number 9 and aligner number 10, it wasn't completely fitting. And the cool and best thing we can do is just hold in that aligner and get final expression of the movement of the teeth so that they fit all the way. And if we have that occur, we've just saved ourselves, again, a quarter of a year, right? We've saved 3 months because it didn't burn on us and we'd have to reboot this whole case. No, we've gotten through this case, which, by the way, reduces refinements. So this is where we're able to reduce refinements because we got a great fit when we're done. And if I do have refinement, it's tweaking stuff in. It's not picking up something that crashed and burned on me. So they're going to get an idea of green, go, or, red box. Now you got to stay an extra week. And it'll share with them why, what's going on. It literally will say, hey, this tooth is not fitting properly. And then you can see this on your scans. It'll also, again, monitor things like hygiene, like is there plaque or calculus? Is there some gingiva that's inflamed? Do they have some recession? We want to keep an eye on that. It's one of the things that sometimes a patient with the old system would go away and they come back and they'd have some recession where we can catch it right away. And if we do, we can say, hey, let's stop treatment here. Let's hold treatment. Let's sort out what's going on. Maybe I need to reboot it and move teeth in a different direction. Rarely do we see that, but it's nice to be able to catch it and catch things like attachments that debond. Don't see that at all. Fractures, rarely see that because the plastic acts as a little splint to protect the teeth, and generally don't see abrasion, but we're aware of these things. I have actually had suspicion of cavities come back, and so it's one of the interesting things that's associated with it. Coolest thing, again, is to be able to measure the milestones. It keeps the patient engaged and part of the treatment, collaborating with us for success. So now let's talk about the overall patient experience. I think that the scan box itself helps to drive compliance. I like to think that that patient app creates some accountability for them, makes them want to have an investment in it themselves, and that the progress reels, that little movie I was talking about, really helps to motivate them. There's nothing better than having them see the movement itself. And generally they're like, wow, it's like I really didn't think that something was going on. And I pushed the button and I watched the movie and I was like, oh my God, my teeth are moving. And if you look at it, it's really impressive because it stacks all those different scans on top of one another and in essence makes it into a little 3D movie of the teeth moving. So really cool for us to be able to do that. Also cool for us to be able to eliminate those routine office visits that we talked about. And the fact that we're able to really, I think, improve the overall oversight of being able to monitor our patients, something that we typically didn't do as well with the old systems, but we definitely do better now. And we use AI to help keep us on track and to use tracking to accomplish our goal. As a doctor, I've mentioned that I love it because I, again, stalk my patients on a regular basis. And for me, that is usually in the airport when I'm waiting for a plane to go teach somewhere. And I can just bring them up and zip through them. And the ones that I'm like, you know what? I might want to send a little note off to this patient and either a note of encouragement or maybe a little scolding. Cool thing is I only get alerts on ones that are not tracking properly. So I will look at those alerts and it'll kind of help me to know I need to go forward with contacting the patient and keeping them on track. If I don't get something, it's more me just out of curiosity. Hey, I wonder how that patient's doing. The neat thing about the candid monitoring is I literally can take snapshots, and if part of my communication is I can circle stuff, I can put arrows on it in different colors, put a happy face, I can, Halloween, I'll go ahead and take a few teeth out and I'll send it to the patient as a little jack-o'-lantern joke. We have a lot of fun with the monitoring. It also lets me know that they're paying attention to the monitoring when we use that to communicate. So it really helps my experience as a doctor Just the sending the messages, I think really helps to keep me engaged with the patients, and to be able to annotate on the pictures themselves really helps to, I think, keep the patient as part of the process. And that brings us to end of treatment. Now, the most important thing with end of treatment, as with all the other important things, is that we get to our final goals, like what we wanted to accomplish. And to do that, the best way is to start with the right cases. So I'm circling back around to that stoplight thing again, and I'm talking about cases that are great everyday cases to treat, ones that are more challenging, the yellow light, and then the red light, which again, you can treat the red light stuff if you want. You just need to have advanced skills. Also, the other thing about the red light stuff, one of the reasons that I personally have a red light stop, I don't want to do that stuff. I typically don't want to do class 3 cases, and I don't want to do orthognathic cases. Cases are going to be super complicated and take a long time. Can I do them? Yeah. Have I done them? I've done them. Yeah, I've done the cases that I, again, wish I hadn't, because they were 3.5 years long. And keep life simple. You don't make any money on those cases. You get a lot of frustration, and in particular, they're challenging. The ones that I love are the bread and butter ones, the green ones that are everyday cases. So start with the right cases, and it makes things a little bit easier for you to begin with. So talking about finishing treatment and the end of treatment for patients, how do you know that you're done, right? How do you know? We talked about goals, and the first thing is patient goals. I want to be sure that I've achieved the goals that the patient wanted. That's not chief concern, right? That is the patient goal, what the patient wanted to accomplish. So be it a brighter, whiter smile, or I want my top teeth to show more and look better. I want to get rid of all the crowding, whatever it might be. I want to make sure that I've achieved their goals. I also want to see that I don't have any open contacts between the teeth as far as food is concerned and eating. It's one of the worst things with cases when you're done is if you have an open contact, that means you got to do some movement to get it closed between more than just a couple teeth, because you have to move a few teeth to get that to occur, or you got to do some rotation, or you may have to do some restorative to help solve that issue. But I want to make sure there's no open contacts. I also want to, going back to the very beginning, see that I've got a stable bite. None of that slipping or shifting. When a patient bites down, I want the CR and CO to be equal. Centric relation and centric occlusion should match in a really good case when we're all done. That's ideal. So patient bites down, teeth come together, no shifting, no slipping, no sliding. I want them to have a retainer that feels comfortable and doesn't feel tight whenever they put it on. It should feel passive, because again, the teeth are stable and wanting to stay in the position that that we've wanted them to achieve. And then finally, am I satisfied? Have I addressed all the concerns that I want to know that I've got a really great long-term result that's going to stay the way that we want it to? Well, to do that, personally, I'm going to have a checklist, and the checklist is going to have a number of things on it to be sure that I've kind of covered all the steps to make sure we are completely done. In particular, if there's attachments, we're going to make sure we've taken them off. We're going to double check any places where we've done IPR with floss to make sure it's smooth and rounded. The floss doesn't get caught or hung up on it, that the contact is snug, so no food gets stuck in there. I may have some restorative treatment that I'm going to complete, and if I have, ideally that has been addressed as part of my comprehensive treatment plan before I even started ortho, so that the patient knows, hey, when we're all done, you may need a little bit of bonding, or you may need some veneers, or we're going to replace the back teeth with some crowns, whatever it might be. I want to make sure I've communicated that, because in particular, I need to identify what treatment I'm happy and willing to do for free as part of the overall ortho treatment, and what I am going to charge for restoratively. So for instance, just to kind of share with you to keep in mind, if someone has just a little bit of bonding, a little bit of enamelplasty to get things looking good, that's included. That's part of the treatment that I'll do. And it's up to me to know that that's going to be the case. If there's old yellow composites that need to be replaced, or we're going to do some veneers when we're all done, obviously those things are going to be an extra charge for the patient. So I just want to identify that, and that helps to make it easy for us to know what the restorative is that's going to be done. We're going to equilibrate and make sure the bite is balanced and even. We always want to take final photos. I'll have a slide on that coming up in a little bit. and we're going to scan for the retainers themselves, and then we're going to go over retention with the patient, make sure that they know. Final thing we do is we actually have a celebrate letter that we have for the patient. Everyone in the office signs it to officially kind of say, yeah, we've done it, we've completed it. There's really kind of two different reasons for it. One is to celebrate, and the other is to act as a little kind of Dear John, that, hey, we're also done with treatment. Our relationship is over at this point. You need to do your part. And you already have. You've worn your aligners successfully, and we've gotten through treatment. We've gotten everything balanced and got you in a good spot. Your part is now just to wear your retainers nightly going forward. We may reduce it at some point in the future, but it's way down the road. If you don't wear your retainers, the one thing I can guarantee you is that your teeth will move just like the rest of your body. So you want to keep them that way. You got to have a little reminder for them. Let's touch base on equilibration. I have talked a little bit about this, and it seems kind of like this mystery thing. It scares some people because we don't really get much exposure to it, but it's super easy. I talked earlier about the hills and valleys and everything matching, and how we've talked about the bite and how important it is. If you can just master the basics of equilibration, it will change your life. It is not difficult. It is not something that is mystery science. It's super easy to do. And when you do it, you end up with stability. And stability is what we're really looking for, because it allows us to have our cases look exactly the same down the road. It's truly that little ounce of prevention equals a pound of cure. So knowing how important that is to keep your case stable, isn't it worth it for you to invest a little bit of time to see that the bite is balanced and even? That may mean, again, getting some outside education. We've got some pretty cool modules in our level 3 classes on equilibration and on bite analysis and how to use a T-scan and some other neat things associated with it. And there's tons of great institutes out there. Probably my 3 favorite are Pankey Institute, which I think is the pinnacle of postdoctoral education. Also, we have Dawson Institute, and on the West Coast, Coyce Institute's great for that as well. Great way for us to master some of those skills that are going to give us beautiful smiles that last a lifetime, which is what we're really aiming for. I also want you to take photos. I mentioned that, and it's the same set of photos. I want you to take some post-op photos for not just your own personal records, but for the patient. They love being able to see this. We always give them all the photos that we've taken before and after. It's funny, with our old system where patients were coming in every 6 weeks, we take photos every 6 weeks and share those with the patient. I now have that done automatically for me with my monitoring system. So we just take those and stack them all together, and we make both a digital video version as well as some hard copies that show before and after. We generally like to also, aside from taking our standard array that we've talked about, our ABO array landscape photos, we also like to take some what we call glamour shots just to celebrate. We, typically kind of give the patient a little heads up that we're going to be taking these post-op photos. Generally, they've already signed a release for me for teaching, use almost all my cases for teaching. And they're generally very happy to share that with the learning dental public. But we say, hey, maybe, if you want to, go ahead and just maybe put on a little makeup or whatever it might be, and might let my team do that talking for us. But it gives us a chance to get some nice outside shots, which we love to do about 9 months of the year in DC. We'll go outside with the foliage and get some really pretty pictures that we share with the patient, and they love those. They really appreciate it. I've had the occasional patient, probably about once every 6 months, someone I've done a aligner treatment on and maybe some cosmetics, ask who my recommendation is for plastic surgeon. Routinely, we'll have, especially blepharoplasty surgery, get rid of bags under the eyes because their smile looks so darn good now. It's cool, it's fun. So photos are really important, and those ones afterwards are really, really cool. They will also be part of our retention thing when they come in for their final retainer. That's when we give them that celebrate letter and the stack of photos and the little jump drive, etc. But this is where the retention part also is important for us, because we got to kind of keep in mind that retention means we are now putting teeth in a position that we want to keep them in for ideally the rest of their lives, right? The cessation of active treatment has finished, and we want them to be stable. Biggest reason for that is the paradigm shift that has occurred with clear aligners. The conundrum, the problem is that orthodontists used to treat our patients and then they give the patients back to us. So kind of them to give the patient back to us. And we would now own the patient. And if they wore the retainer, we'd be all set. If they didn't wear the retainer, things might go crooked. And then they'd say to us, hey, my teeth are crooked. We'd say, go back to the orthodontist. But if we are treating the patients, it really behooves us to do a good job and to see that the patient has good retention. So it ties into that whole equilibration thing. If you ever worked with an orthodontist that maybe didn't do complete work, the retainers wouldn't fit after a week or two, and then the patient would be frustrated and stop wearing it, and the teeth would go back, and then no one wins, right? So the patients come in every 6 months, and you want to make sure that the teeth are staying straight. Best way for us to do that is to make sure that we've got the right retainers for them. Let's cover that, right? Let's talk about it, because we see those patients for life. Again, the orthodontist gives the patient back, but we see them for life. So we want to make sure that we've got the right type of retention to keep the teeth in the right position. Now, really, there's just two types, fixed and removable. And if we think about fixed, some of the reasons that we might want to use fixed is someone who's got some periodontal mobility to begin with, an older patient that's had a lot of gum recession and maybe bone loss. Maybe they've got a really strong tongue thrust that's related to possibly an airway issue that may be putting pressure against those teeth that push them. And situations like that, we might want to have fixed retention, which would mean something that's going to hold the teeth and on the teeth all the time. Maybe it's because the patient will admit that they're going to be non-compliant with a removable. We've got patients all the time who are like, hey man, I got through the clear aligners, but boy, I barely got through it. Man, it was like, thank God it's over. Yeah, put the bar on there on the bottom teeth. I do not want to have to worry about wearing something every night. Other patients are like, no, I used to wear a night guard every night, and now I'm happy wearing this. As a matter of fact, it's really weird. I don't clench or grind as much because I guess my teeth are in the right position. I'm like, yeah, so just wear these retainers and you're in good shape. Lastly is incomplete orthodontics, which is a terrible answer for fixed. You're trying to hold stuff in a position that it doesn't belong in. It's that kind of thing where you've got an unstoppable force and an immovable object. Something's got to give at some point, right? It can't stay that way. And then you put something fixed on there, it breaks, it wears down, teeth chip, you end up with TMJ. So incomplete ortho, we see it occasionally for someone who might be undergoing, say, chemotherapy or maybe really bad personal stuff. But otherwise, I like to get them in a good spot and get them done. What types of fixed do we have? Well, probably the most common is the monofilament wire. Monofilament can also, by the way, be the equivalent of something flexible like fishing line. But when we talk about monofilament wire, we're talking about basically a single paperclip type wire, right? And it's bent to fit on the teeth, generally bonded to the two canines on the bottom, but can be on others. There's also a bonded reinforced mesh, which we don't use as much anymore because that stuff kind of breaks off after a little while and the mesh gets all stinky and gross. The most common one that we place right in the office that's not pre-bent is a multi-strand wire. Usually that's an 0125 or 0175 braided wire, and that gets tacked down on each tooth. There's also like a chain that's very similar to it that gets tacked down on each tooth. And then you'll see on the top right something that's kind of newer. It's called a V-loop. If they're done right and done well, they're tacked down on each tooth, but they go down to the gum line and allows the patient to floss between the teeth. Really super cool. They need to be made well so that they hug the teeth. They still have to be bent properly. If they are, they're out of the way. They don't trap food or anything, and the patient can keep the teeth clean. They don't end up with a calculus bridge around that because they typically don't floss all the time when they've got those types of devices in, but they can if it's a V-loop. What about removable? When do we want to use removable? Well, if we've got, again, nice solid bite, we've done our part, right? We've got that CRCO thing going for us. Patient's compliant, and they're going to wear their retainers nightly at first, at least, and kind of keep things stable for us that way. mostly they're already familiar with it because they probably went through clear aligners, right? We can use the cool Permaform retainer system without having used the Candid aligner system. You can use fixed or some other system to get there and still use the best retainer system in the market right now. So they're familiar with it and they already understand, so it helps out with that. But also if they're a clencher, a grinder, a bruxer, it's really great to have that plastic between the teeth to act as a little bumper to keep things from going haywire on us. Generally, when we do that, I'll typically tell patients that if we're doing removable aligner retainers, that they last about a year, and we'll cover that in a little bit more detail. Finally, there's one other that I think is pretty important, and that is a combination with fixed. So sometimes we'll have someone who's got such strong tongue thrust that we'll go ahead and put a lower fixed wire on, sometimes even an upper fixed wire, and we'll still make a removable retainer that goes over it. And the reason for that is that we've seen documented cases where patients have such strong tongue thrust that they literally push that anterior segment forward and open up a gap behind the canines on either side from that force. So the extra removable retainer fitting over that fixed helps to keep things in place. These are some of the different ones that you're familiar with. We've got the typical Essex Trutane in the top left, a hybrid, which can be either a thermoplastic suck down with a wire in it, or it can be a thermoplastic fabricated one, splint or a night guard on the bottom left. And then probably the standard for removable retainers is still the Hawley, which you see on the bottom right there. The reason that the Hawley is so good and helps to maintain the teeth in the exact position is not the wire that goes around the front, the labial bow. It is the scalloping of the acrylic on the lingual surface. I think average lifespan is 14 years for those. They usually get eaten by the dog. You've seen ones that are 25, 30 years old that people have had. And if they wear those regularly, they're great. The challenge is that a lot of people don't want to wear them because they don't look like the nice clear liners that they went through, and they feel like they're back in high school with these things. But I offer these options, and sometimes I actually insist, if I've got someone who's got some sort of TMJ issue, I may have a splint in one arch, sometimes the upper, and I'll have a Hawley on the bottom arch, or vice versa. The Hawley stays out of the way of the splint, so it doesn't interfere with the occlusion, allows the patients to slide around and keep their jaw in the most comfortable position. And the Hawley in the opposite arch obviously is holding things in place. Why would I want to use retention? That's something that patients ask. Why do I want to do that? And my answer is, would you drive a car without insurance? I mean, like, would you risk blowing everything up? Because that's what you're doing if you don't have some sort of retention. You put all this time and money into this, and you've made this wonderful choice to improve your health. Let's go ahead and have something that can keep it in place. It's a really, really small lift for us. And again, we talked about this way back at the beginning, right? This is at the consultation that we covered it. And again, those 7 things, just in case you may not remember, but they're compliance, monitoring, attachments, IPR, refinement, equilibration, and then, of course, the big one at the end there, retention. Make sure the patient's aware of all these things, why they're important, why we need to have those to have good success. And if you do, you'll have great success. Let's take a quick peek at just the comparison between the different systems that are out there. And one of the neat things about the Permaform system, it's, again, super comfortable. My big thing is that we've got something that we know is going to hold the teeth really, really well. It's compliant. Patients are super compliant with it because it fits so well. Yes, you can whiten your teeth with it if you like as well. And it has all the cool things like being able to use it for a Pontic if a patient needs to have something in place there. But biggest thing is that they last, I typically say they last about a year. And the way that we do it is we give a patient 4, which is about, by the way, I think less than half the price of the competitors out there for 4 retainers. So good value for them, for my patients, good value for me. I'm happy to give them 4. And I usually say it lasts about a year piece. What you do is it's your hygiene visit that's a year out, bring your retainers in. We'll try them in. It takes me 30 seconds to tell. I can put in the one that you're wearing and and then put in a new one. If the new one feels super tight, it means the plastic has fatigued. It's a good time to go to it. If you put it in and you're like, it feels the same as the other, I'm like, okay, put them away for 6 more months. Let's see. I've had patients have this use the same number one aligner for 3 or 4 years. Yet I've also had other patients that change every 3 months because they're just heavy clenchers and grinders. And what happens is it flexes the plastic. The advantage of the Permaform system is that it's got that high trim on it. It's going to hold them much better than the scalloped one, which is, again, very poor way of doing it. So really big fan, love the way that they fit and work. Ordering them is super simple. You can do it right on the site. Remember that you can't use an aligner because aligners are made to move teeth and retainers are moved to keep teeth from moving, as I like to say. So great to use that aligner as a stopgap retainer, and I'll use those for up to 3 or 4 months sometimes, especially if I'm doing some restorative treatment. I don't mind cutting and bending them and doing all sorts of stuff to get through the rest of the restorative. But then I'm going to go to the retainers, and I can order those right on the site. I literally go into the patient form, and right where it says additional aligners on the right-hand side, there's a little blue button, and you push that, and then it'll say, hey, do you want to use the last step or do you want to scan? And super important thing I'd like to share, always scan if you can. And the reason that it's preferred is that no matter what, things in the mouth are a little bit different than they are with that last aligner. Just something is a little bit different. It makes so much more sense to go ahead and scan and have something that's exactly the way the patient is. After you've equilibrated, done restorative, enamoplasty, all the other things, now you've got some retainers that fit really, really well. So if you want to, you can use the last step, but they make that available. But my recommendation is to go ahead and be sure to scan for those final sets, and it gives us a good idea of how things are seated and fitting. So what do you need for that? You simply just take scans, send them in, and click the button, and you can have those sent to the patient at home, or the patient can come in. In our case, we like to fit them and make sure they fit, and then we do our celebrate letter and usually give the patient some extra whitening gel, to kind of see them off, and we have that nice packet of photos that we give them. It's a great way for us to kind of wrap up the treatment, and the patient's happy. If they need more retainers down the road, say they come in hygiene, we'll usually scan again if they need new ones, and just we say, hey, we'll send those. You know how to wear retainers. If you have any issue when they arrive, try them in. And if you have any issue, come on back. We really haven't had any issues at all with that. So great way for us to do it, and a great way for us to sum up just this wonderful experience. And thank you for spending time with me for this Care One introduction to clear aligners using the Candid Pro system of straightening teeth. We looked at module 1 where we covered kind of types of malocclusion and the consequences of bad teeth and bad bites and the basics of straightening that out, and talked a little bit about that traffic light framework, being able to identify cases that are good for you. We talked in module 2 about taking records and submitting a case, and more on the basics of tooth movement and how to do the review with ortho, look at our pro plan and figure out what we might want to change or whatever to get to the final result. And then a little bit about the manufacturing, which we're real proud of at Candid. And then our final module here today, we talked about starting, monitoring, finishing treatment, using adjuncts associated with it, having your checklists, in particular, when you're all done, to know that you've accomplished everything for treatment. And then kind of also, obviously, how to know when you're done, right? So what's next? What do we have next? Well, first and foremost, I would like for you to not put this on a shelf and forget about it. I want you to engage right away. This is a great start for you and a great start for your team to start with simple cases. So begin by treating your staff. If you've got someone on your team that's got snaggletooth, a bite that doesn't look right, or some crowding, great place to start is with them. And you want it to be a green light case. We'd like to have all those cases be green light cases till you got maybe a dozen or even up to 20 under your belt. You'll see that some of the challenges that we see with cases are at the end of treatment, not the beginning. So easy to start a whole bunch, but I like to get into them, and typically doing 2 or 3 a month when you initially get going is okay, and then you're going to find that you're going to be doing 1 a week, and then probably like me and everyone else should be doing 3 a week. You're going to make it affordable for your patients, and you're going to do that by creating an awareness. You want patients to know about this really great new service that you have, and if they do, they're going to come to you, and then you're going to have some questions and maybe not be sure of what you need to do next. So you're going to work with your account executive to see that you've got everything smooth with the Candid journey, because we want it to be something that's seamless. It should be. It's part of the cool new disruptive technology of clear aligners, is to be doing the right stuff for both the doctor and for the patients. And the account executive will help you get going with that, as will your ortho specialist. Again, remember, those ortho specialists are generally these retired orthodontists here in the US who speak very good English. We have ones that speak other languages as well, but in particular, you've got them as a backup for you. They've seen thousands and thousands of cases. They've treated thousands and thousands of patients themselves, and really just love this so much that they love helping out. So you can set up a time to talk with them. And you can imagine, getting 20 minutes of an orthodontist time who's seen thousands of cases. That's a pretty nice little perk, right? So don't be afraid to take advantage of it. And, you could do it asynchronously too. You can have them build a video and discuss stuff with you if you want. There's lots of great ways. Email communication works as well. And then finally, I want you to continue on your journey, your continuing education journey, and your journey of growth in dentistry. And to do that, we've got other care modules. Remember, Care 2 is kind of the advanced, and then the moderate, and then advanced is Care 3, where you can really kind of move up your skill set. If you do all those things, you'll find that it just becomes a joy to keep practicing. And you're like most people, like me, you probably don't want to quit. So thanks for spending time. I really appreciate it. And I wish you the best. And I look forward to seeing you at some point in dentistry in the future.